Are conservatives safe from big tech? One conservative's account from his time at one of the most powerful and most left-wing companies will shock you. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has gardening advice for us, and she says to avoid cauliflower because it's too colonial. The owner of Gibson's bakery took the stand this week, in his case against Oberlin College. We'll look at that, plus a whole lot more. I'm Bobby Eberle. This is a 13-minute news hour.
And God bless the United States of America.
All right, on Monday, we talked about the tweet that Jim Carrey put out, and it's just horrible. And guess what? I just checked, and it's still up there. No penalties, no suspensions, nothing. Now, on the conservative side, Facebook bans conservatives all the time. Twitter suspends accounts all the time. One of the most powerful companies in the entire world is a bastion for left-wing thought, and that's Google. And yesterday, one of their software engineers who identifies as Republican put out a letter that is just shocking about what it's like to work there surrounded by people that are basically out to get him and out to suppress any conservative thought that he might have. Here's a report from the Daily Caller. A Republican Google software engineer has written an open letter describing a culture of left-wing outrage mobs that make use of the company's anonymous reporting channels to shut down dissent. The open letter, published Tuesday morning on Medium, was written by software engineer Mike Wacker, who was reported himself multiple times via the company's anonymous reporting tools. Now, if you look at Wacker's letter, it's about a 15-minute read. It is so detailed with example after example, not only of things happening to him, but to others as well. Here's just an excerpt from his letter. These outrage mobs against hate have become honeypots for toxic, hostile, and uncivil discourse. While some of their rhetoric is so outlandish that you have no choice but to laugh, the psychological effects of these outrage mobs have on their targets is nothing to laugh about. Just read this excerpt from Kay Coles-James about her own experience with Google's outrage mob. And Kay Coles-James is African-American conservative who was brought on by Google to be part of an AI, artificial intelligence committee, and just received a ton of outrage. Here's her excerpt. She said, in 1961, at age 12, I was one of 24 black children who integrated an all-white junior high school in Richmond. While parents jeered me outside the school and inside, their kids stuck me with pins, shoved me in the halls, and pushed me down the stairs. So when the group of Google employees resorted to calling names and making false accusations because they didn't want a conservative voice advising the company, the hostility was reminiscent of what I felt back then. That same intolerance for someone who was different from them. And then Wacker writes, I won't lie, that was a tough part to read, but if you ask the outrage mob, that wasn't the real problem. The real question was this, and then he quotes one of the anonymous complainers. So the real question to this is whether or not we think there's value in having the grand wizard of the KKK on this board. He's talking about Kay Coles-James, an African-American conservative, and he compares her to a grand wizard of the KKK. It's just absolutely nuts, folks. But this is what's going on, and this is what we have to fight back on. And I'm going to keep bringing it up and bring up these examples, and more conservative outlets, if they do the same, the message will get across, because that we have to fight back. We have to take a stand. Otherwise, they're going to keep muscling people. And, thank goodness for this Mike Wacker who's speaking out while still at Google. I can't imagine the pressure he must be going under. So now let's talk about Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, because she puts out some bizarre stuff. But this one, I actually need your help, because I do not know what she's talking about. I didn't know there was such a thing as woke vegetables, but apparently there is, because she's calling cauliflower too colonial to plant. And here's the report from the Washington Examiner. It says, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez explained Sunday that a core component of her Green New Deal legislation is ending colonial attitudes that dominate community gardens. When you really think about it, when someone says that it's too hard to do a green space that grows yucca instead of, cauliflower or something, what you're doing is that you're taking a colonial approach to environmentalism. And that is why a lot of communities of color get resistant to certain environmentalist movements, because they come with the colonial lens on them, Ocasio-Cortez said. What in the world does that even mean? I don't even know what that means. But here's a little part of her video as she's saying all this, and maybe it'll help you understand. Check this out.
Our communities are naturally in tune to live in an environmentally conscious way. You know, a lot of us are 1 or 2 generations removed from living off the land. My family in Puerto Rico, in many ways, lives off the land.
All right, first of all, she's almost 30 years old. She's lived, in the city and in suburbs. She's never lived off the land, and she's walking by a parking lot of an apartment complex. None of those people have ever lived off the land. What is she even talking about? And then she adds this.
If I went to a predominantly white community and said, okay, you guys are going to be growing plantains and yucca and all these things that you don't know how to cook, and that your palate isn't accustomed to, it's gonna be like cute for a little bit, but it's not easy. You need to make it as easy as possible to kind of just flow into these communities and to make it work.
So I don't get, are we talking about forcing people to eat cauliflower and replacing that with these other woke vegetables? I just don't get it. But then she adds this part that is really telling and says a lot about not just her thinking, but the thinking of the left in general. Check this out.
So the way that you do this right is that you don't kind of come into a community and impose what you think is right. That is what so many community development projects get wrong.
Okay, I get it now. If you're talking about community organizing, you shouldn't impose your will upon others. That's a bad thing. But if you're talking about, say, the entire U.S. economy, then it's perfectly okay for the left to impose a socialist transformation of the entire economy, entire major means of production and major elements of the economy. That's okay. But community organizing, don't impose your will. Don't bring that cauliflower in here. That's way too white. That's way too colonial for me. So, folks, jump in the comments. Let me know what she's talking about because I still don't understand. All right, I want to get to Gibson's Bakery because testimony continued the last couple days. Got reports from testimony from Monday and Tuesday, and it's really, really interesting. We talked earlier about them trying to put a valuation on the company, and that discussion continued as well. This is Gibson's Bakery suing Oberlin College because of their aiding and abetting, basically, in the defamation and libel of the bakery, accusing them of being racist simply because they decided to prosecute 3 black shoplifters when most of the people over the years who've shoplifted from the bakery are actually white. But that didn't stop Oberlin from accusing these guys or being part of a mass mob mentality of students that said this bakery was racist. And the damage done has been considerable. And here's some of that testimony. Check this out. In a half day of testimony that was full of numbers, the jury deciding whether Oberlin College defamed and libeled a small business heard that the bakery market had already lost and will lose about $5.8 million from the school's alleged racist accusations. That number was arrived at by an independent accountant who based the figures on losses over a 30-year period. When you look at how the revenues have declined, it is clear that those numbers represent that something major happened, said Frank Monaco, a certified public accountant who is managing partner of a 60-member accounting firm and financial consulting firm based in Canton, Ohio. Monaco has been a CPA for almost 40 years. All right. And that put the defense a little bit on their heels. And here's a little bit more from their counter. Things got testy during the cross-examination of Monaco by Oberlin College's attorney, Matthew Nacon. Do you hold that Oberlin College is responsible for every human being that doesn't shop there anymore? Nacon asked. Monaco paused and Nacon asked him again. Do you understand my question? Okay, now of course, they're talking about future lost business and things like that. And some of that's hard to estimate, but that's the whole job. That's what they were presenting to the jury. But some of the other facts, it's not estimations. It's not, guesswork or anything like that. It's just cold, hard numbers. And here's some of the business lost from Gibson's due to their loss of the food service business and the racist attitudes that the students spread throughout the campus, and here's how that affected business. In 2015, Gibson's took in about $48,000 in OB dollars shopping from students. Then $44,000 in 2016. The protests happened November 10th and 11th that year. But in the next 2 years, the OB dollars spending dropped off the campus cliff. Oberlin College students spent only $9,000 in OB dollars at the store in 2017 and about $5,000 in 2018. So OB dollars are like the food credit, your meal plan, where you put money into your account and you can use it on campus or campus designated stores or off campus at certain establishments. Gibson's was one of those establishments. And so you could see that students in 2015 and 16 spent almost $48,000. And then following the protests, dropped to $9,000 and $5,000. So that's real damage right there. And then the other thing I want to point out is that the owner of the store took the stand yesterday, and he brought up some points that I can't wait for the defense to come back and try and counter these, because it's really helped him at least set a narrative to the jury that Oberlin was out to get them. All right, here's what the owner, and that's David Gibson, 67-year-old owner of this family establishment that's been there for about 135 years. Here's what he told the jury. He said he had at least 3 official meetings with school officials in the months after the students' protests, including one with Oberlin College president. He raised the request each time and several other times over the phone, and that if the school would send out some message saying the business was not racist, they might be able to move towards some form of reconciliation without going to court. They ignored me, he said. As to why he thinks this all happened, I look at this now and realize they wanted me to drop charges this time and set up a system when we would call the college for first-time offenders, David Gibson says. The school administration have been accused of being racist by students in previous years, and I think they used this to deflect the problem they had. I believe they were using us as a target so that their racial problems with the students would go away. So it's fascinating, folks. There's a lot more to the story. And I believe this Friday, the defense will start calling its witnesses. So we'll see them fighting back. We'll see what happens. But when you see that the monetary loss that Gibson's has faced because of these protests and the way that the university just jumped on board, you really hope that Gibson's Bakery can pull it out. Folks, that's our show for today. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next time. Please subscribe and please hit that bell. I'm Bobby Eberle. This is a 13-minute news hour.